Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate they've been looking for. What should be the most seamless and quiet operation is showing signs of an impending shakeup. Nurses are up in arms making demands. The public is upset about fee increases, and after years and years of hearing the same, there is still complaints of bad service at our public health care and emergency facilities. The Ministry of Health has been in the spotlight recently for a myriad of negatives, inclusive of a looming strike by nurses. On the flip side, though, the 65-year-old Princess Margaret Hospital will see many improvements in the near future, and a plethora of nurses graduated recently from the University of the Bahamas, bringing up the short numbers of nurses. Tonight, cardiovascular surgeon, the Minister of Health, Dr. Dwayne Sands, joins us to speak to the fee increases at PMH, the unsettled nurses, HIV/AIDS in the Bahamas, and a number of pressing health-related issues. Our topic is PHA, transforming Bahamian healthcare. It's all on the record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
Every time I'm in the Bahamas, I use Rev Go Play.
Cut. Here come that food. It's packing. Here he comes.
Yo.
Wait, Omar coming.
Boy, this Rev Go Play, solid.
Rev, you and us together.
Welcome back to On the Record. The Minister of Health, Dr. Dwayne Sands, joins us tonight. We are discussing PHA, transforming Bahamian healthcare. Dr. Sands, welcome back to On the Record.
Good evening. It's been a long time.
Yeah, and last time you were here, we only gave you a portion of the show. Tonight, I decided we're going to give you a full hour, primarily because I think this is an ideal time to talk about the delivery of healthcare and the reforms that are needed. First of all, I think it's important that we sort of set the scene to talk about what does it take financially to operate all of the things that come under the banner of PHA and public health.
So let's start with health. And health is run through the Ministry of Health almost completely. So you have the Ministry of Health, and that is, for the most part, segmented into the Department of Public Health, which would be the surveillance, public health services, epidemiology. And then you have the Public Hospitals Authority, which runs the major hospitals, the emergency medical services, and what used to be called the Bahamas National Drug Agency, now merged to form the Supplies Management Agency. Together we have a budget of just over $300 million, and the Public Hospital Authority gets about $206 million to run Sandilands, Princess Margaret Hospital, Rand Memorial Hospital, and those other things that I mentioned. It really costs about $270 million to meet the actual expenses of the Public Hospital Authority. And so over a period of many years, essential costs have been eliminated by making some very, very difficult and painful decisions. Some of them some of those decisions have led to challenges that exist today.
So you're looking at on an annual basis about 50 to 60 million in deficit.
50 to 60 million dollars in deficit, which historically has been met with the Public Hospital Authority going hand in hand to central government, Ministry of Finance, and say, you know, can you throw us a blow? When the government had the ability to provide an extra subvention, then it did so. Unfortunately, given the lack of fiscal headroom in 2017, 2018, moving into 2019, you've got to pay as you go. And we now find ourselves in a situation where we have to match services and costs with revenue or subvention. And so if we're going to provide $300 million of service, including salaries, benefits, supplies, services, then we need $300 million of either subvention, revenue raised by the facilities, or we have to close that gap.
Let's talk a little bit about the revenue and what it's costing to provide, or what is the cost of the delivery of healthcare on an annual basis versus what we are paying, and I say we as a public, whether it be through insurance or over the counter or however it is. What is it that it costs to see the Bahamian public every year versus what we are paying as a public?
So Bahamians pay indirectly for the provision of health services. Let's start with that. Through the consolidated fund, through the annual budgetary allotment or allowance to health, monies come from the people and is apportioned to the Ministry of Health and the PHA.
Monies in the form of value-added tax, customs, all those
Real
kind
property
of things, real
tax,
property,
etc.
all these taxes that we pay. Okay.
But the Public Hospital Authority is also allowed by law to bill patients. Now we talk about the gazetted fees, which have not been updated for many decades. And those gazetted fees say that every patient that comes to the hospital, with exceptions, should pay a certain fee for a particular service. For instance, an emergency room visit, you should pay $10. If you have an x-ray, which will cost $100 in the private sector, typically you should pay about $15. An ambulance ride, and while I may not be 100% correct on this, typically the public is expected to pay $25 for an ambulance ride, which costs us about $250
$10 to see the emergent to go into the emergency room. It's about $20, $25 for the ambulance ride. These are very nominal fees, I would think.
They are less than nominal fees.
I was being generous.
And they reflect several things. The fact that there has already been a tax applied, so people have prepaid a part of the cost of care. The decision to create this gazette was made many decades ago, in the 70s, and it reflected a time when healthcare costs were dramatically less than they are, and where the healthcare burden is nowhere near as significant as it is now.
The population was smaller as well. Right?
The problem, however, is that many people that come to the emergency room or come to the hospital either cannot, do not, or are not expected to pay. Let's go through each of them. If we look, for instance, at Princess Margaret Hospital's emergency room, what I call ground zero, when people think about healthcare in the Bahamas, they go to PMH and the emergency room. Every year we see about 55 to 60,000 patients.
In that space?
In that space. 55 to 60,000 patients. It's one of the busiest emergency rooms around. We collect less than $200,000.
From 50 to 60,000 people?
From
less than 200,000?
Let's say 55,000 people.
Wow.
So that works out to $3 per patient collected. Now these are people with gunshot wounds, stab wounds, heart attacks, strokes, etc.
$3 per patient?
$3 per patient. So it actually costs us more to pay for the registration staff and the collection of money than we collect.
That's not the nurses, that's not the physicians, the supplies, etc.
So
$3.
It's actually about $2.50. Now, 87% of the people that come to Princess Margaret Hospital do not pay. Some of them are exempted by policy. So we have a policy that says that children below a certain age don't pay. Pensioners above a certain age don't pay. Civil servants don't pay, and on and on and on.
Civil servants don't pay either?
Now,
Employed civil
this
servants?
rule was created before the people of the Bahamas and the government of the Bahamas started providing major medical insurance coverage to a number of civil servants. And so before people got their major medical insurance, this was a perk of being a civil servant. But now, so Dr. Sands, who's a politician, has a Kalina health insurance plan. But when I go to the hospital, we don't take advantage of that plan.
So people aren't using the insurance?
No, because there's this policy that we are changing, by the way, that says that, you know, civil servants are exempt.
So Dr. Sands,
So
people aren't paying
87%.
$10 to come to the emergency room?
No.
They don't have $10?
No. So we collect on average, and oftentimes primarily from non-Bahamians, and whether that's non-Bahamians that live in the Bahamas or visitors, and a small group of individuals that subsidize the care. If you look at the total revenue of the Public Hospitals Authority, that's Grand Bahama, Sandilands, Princess Margaret Hospital, inclusive of private services, we collect probably about $10 million per year, and last year we did less than that. What does it mean? When we look at bills that we could benefit from insurance revenue, and we estimate that we lose about $40+ million per year from insurance, people that have insurance, that are willing to pay for their services, but because we cannot provide bills in a timely fashion.
So we can't bill the people?
No. We have a manual system that we can create bills, but oftentimes those bills are not presented in a format that the insurance companies need. So there's such a thing called a CPT, Current Procedural Terminology, where every service provided by a physician or a healthcare facility is coded 99070. And that goes along with an ICD-10, or International Classification of Disease, Series 10 code for what illness you have. And without that, the insurance companies, Atlantic Medical, Generali, Kalina, BAF, whatever, they are unable to process a claim.
So they are willing to pay,
They are willing to pay.
but the hospitals can't provide
We
the
do
proper
not have
billing.
the capacity in many instances.
When you say capacity, the human capacity, the technological capacity,
the technological capacity
in 2018?
in 2018. And so we are fixing this right now. So we estimate conservatively that we lose about $40 million per year simply by the inability to bill and collect insurance companies. We have a number of people that come in with road traffic injuries. The Road Act that says that every car on the road has to have coverage for personal injury. Hundreds of people that come in having been in them. Jerome crashed into my car. I have whiplash. I go to the emergency room. We don't take advantage of Jerome's car insurance.
So these people who crash in the car doing foolishness and presenting themselves, not that every accident is that, but and presenting themselves, aren't paying either.
So we don't get that revenue. Workers' compensation, NIB. So what you have is many civil servants who have health insurance paid for by the people and the government of the Bahamas. people that have NIB, people injured in car accidents, all of whom could benefit from coverage through these policies. And they benefit Jackson Memorial Hospital, Baptist Hospital,
Well,
Cleveland
they have to pay
Clinic, and
those
so on and so
institutions,
forth.
yeah.
But the major healthcare facility of the Bahamas has not capitalized on that revenue.
So, okay, that's just, and that's looking at those who have insurance, who have the ability to pay through their medical insurance. But there are those also who willfully are not paying, eh?
Right.
And you're talking about minimal fees sometimes, eh?
Yes. So if we compare an emergency room visit, which if you include x-rays, a CAT scan, so on and so forth, may cost at a different local facility $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. The nominal charge at Princess Margaret Hospital is $10, and you may incur other charges. But as I've said, on average, the collection is about $2.50 per patient.
And I don't want to seem insensitive by any stretch of the imagination, because there are people who have found themselves in a position, I'm sure, who are unable to pay. But by and large, what is the reaction when people are presented with a bill, or to say that you need to pay this fee or this comes with a cost? And these people, I'm sure, didn't come there broke or without means.
Again, historically, we have had a culture which has been supported by the political culture that says that when you go to any healthcare facility, you shouldn't have to pay, right? So the idea is that there's an expectation that I shouldn't have to pay. There are exceptions to that there are some people who are fighting to pay, and then they're told, well, hey, you don't have a bill, or your bill is $87. And people look at it and say, but I had this, I had that, I had the next thing. How could it only be $87? What that translates into is serious challenges on the other end for delivering services, okay? So when we look at the bills that get created that finally need to go out, and there is no delivery address, it says Dwayne Sands General Delivery, okay?
Post office floor.
As of the end of 2017, Princess Margaret Hospital had outstanding accounts receivables of $780 million.
$780 million. Money's owed.
Money's owed.
By Bahamians.
By Bahamians to the Princess Margaret Hospital based on the dramatically subsidized gazetted fees. So imagine if that was at market value. Let's give some examples. I go into Doctor's Hospital tonight. An ICU bed will bill out at $2,000. That's just for the bed. I come to Princess Margaret Hospital, that same bed, same monitors, same nursing, same physician staff, $200. If it's a neonatal intensive care bed, it's $60. Same bed. Now, I could see that there is some subsidy there, and so it ought to be less in the public sector. But $2,000 as compared to $60 makes no sense.
And sir, we got to go to the break, but be quick to pay the $2,000 at Doctor's Hospital. So we are going to be right back with more On the Record right after this quick break.
Hi, I'm Davriel, and welcome to Rev Tips, where we answer your most important Rev service questions. Today, I want to talk to you about the exciting new Rev Go Play app. But how does it work? Well, you start by opening a Cable Bahamas My account, so you can take your TV everywhere. Here's a few notes to get you started watching TV on the go. Step 1. Create a Cable Bahamas My account. Step 2. Download the latest version of the RevGo Play app from the Google Play or iTunes App Store. Step 3. Log into the app using your email and My Account password. Step 4. Enjoy your Rev TV on the go. Well, that's our Rev tip for today. Be sure to join us next time for more information on how to get the best out of all your Rev services.
We are back with more on the record. Dr. Dwayne Sands, the Minister of Health, is my guest tonight. We're talking about, which really is, I think, a shocker when you look at the numbers that you would have just given us in terms of monies or the nominal fees that people are not paying. I mean, you're talking about $10 for a visit to A&E. And that's not even the other services that the hospital provides. We were talking in the break about dialysis,
right,
and what that costs.
Right. So the cost for a dialysis patient per year to the public is about $50,000. Sometimes it's more expensive, may go up to about $80,000 per patient per year. And we have conservatively almost 500 patients on dialysis, paid for by the people of the Bahamas. What that means is that it is incredibly expensive to provide that service, and there's very little being contributed towards the cost.
So
of that care.
I can walk into dialysis today, into the dialysis unit today, and not have to pay a thing.
Right. Now, a number of people do not have the ability to pay, but some do.
And that's understandable. Out of those 500, I'm sure.
And because of capacity challenges, we have to outsource to a number of private dialysis facilities.
Which now you have to bear the costs, the full cost.
And we have to bear the cost of that, and that costs us many millions of dollars every year. Now, I think it's very important for us to ask, well, what does this mean? When we talk about the transformation of the Public Hospital Authority and healthcare, one of the first things you need is the revenue in order to accomplish the transformation. So we have the vision. Now it's a concept of where are we going to find the money. And I like the example of the revolution that took place at the Airport Authority. People remembering Nassau International Airport can remember the days when you had nasty, dirty bathrooms, when the roof was leaking, when the parking lot was kind of catch as catch can, when the person in the booth would have to run from one side to the next in order to collect your funds. Cars got broken into because of its inadequate lighting. The decision was made, okay, we're going to fix up the bathrooms. We're going to fix up the parking. We're going to transform this place. And now Bahamians have a wonderful facility, which is probably best in class in the region. That is what we're going to do to our healthcare facilities. And we've started that transformation. But I have to keep reminding the public why we're doing this.
Why, and then how is it going to be funded when we have a culture where people will not pay?
Well, there is legal precedent and a legal mandate for people to pay, albeit gazetted fees, which we have already described as being very, very low. But when somebody says that it's cheaper for me to come to the hospital in an ambulance than it is to take a haka or to take a taxi. So let's imagine what it costs to provide that ambulance, which is $120,000, $130,000 plus wear and tear. An EMT or paramedic, a driver, medication, etc. Dwayne Sands now says, I need to go to the hospital because I have a cold or flu.
I need a ride to the hospital, basically, because it's not an emergency.
So I call for an ambulance and I say, I'm having shortness of breath. The ambulance goes out there to pick up Dwayne Sands, who's had this cold for a couple of days. But then when Jerome calls because his mother is having a heart attack or his sister is in serious distress, all of the units are already out on the road. And so it has a trickle-down negative impact.
So there now is the outcry.
And so people say, you know, we've been calling for an ambulance now for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes, no ambulance reach yet. Okay? These are the unintended consequences of the culture that we have created.
And so people are taking advantage of the emergency system as well, because that same cold or flu or whatever or minor incident can be treated even at one of the clinics. But you catch an ambulance ride and then you have to come and sit in A&E.
Hence the reason why we're developing Elizabeth Estates and South Beach as urgent care centers, in order to give people a realistic alternative to coming to accident emergency.
Dr. Zahn, it would seem to me that, you know, akin to all of this is you all need a very serious public education campaign.
Yes.
To get people to understand what it is that they're doing, because the Bahamian people, by my estimation, are destroying their own healthcare system.
But, you know, I don't think necessarily maliciously so.
Yeah.
If I believe that I ain't supposed to pay nothing, and my representative tell me I ain't supposed to pay nothing, then what I can pay? If I need this $10 for lunch tomorrow, okay? I am a voter in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I put Dr. Sands there. I ain't paying nothing.
You need to figure it out.
Let him deal with it. And he's complaining too much anyway.
We find money to go to Miami. We find money to buy clothes, to buy numbers, to do all manner of things that are not necessities, but cars seem to be able to find even basic fees. And now you are talking about putting a fee structure in place and increasing those fees.
So there are persons who cannot pay.
And I understand
There
that.
are people who, no matter whether they want to pay, cannot pay. Let me say categorically, we are not going to turn anybody away. But you cannot say to me that 90% of the population of the Bahamas is unable to pay for health services, particularly when they're only being asked to make a contribution. Because what the fees ask is that you make a contribution, a copay as it were, towards the economical costs of the service. What that percentage ought to be, we can debate that all day. But I know that in order for me to have a maintenance contract on expensive equipment in the critical care block, it costs millions of dollars per year, which we don't have. And so none of the equipment in the critical care block has an existing maintenance contract.
So all that money that was spent in that wonderful,
Millions
beautiful
of dollars.
building, millions of dollars worth of equipment cannot be maintained.
It cannot be maintained.
Is
we
it
have
still
to, we have to
functional?
wait. Some of the equipment is broken down because, you know, a maintenance contract on an expensive piece of equipment could be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the maintenance contract on a CAT scan, let's say a CAT scan is $1.5 million. You should have a maintenance contract on that CAT scan that says that every few weeks it'll be serviced and so on and so forth. We don't have the money, and we haven't had the money for the last 5+ years, and perhaps even longer. And so what happens is that if you were to now ask how many C-arms, X-ray machines, are dysfunctional in the operating room, they were brand new 5 or 6 years ago. A number of them no longer work because they have not been maintained. Now that is a consequence of not having money. 80%, give or take, of the money invested in health goes to pay salary and staff benefits. You then have to pay for medication, vaccines, keep the lights on, pay the water bill, and so on and so forth, which leaves a tiny amount. And in 2018, 2019, we have $12 million total for the Public Hospital Authority for capital works, which means if we want to buy a new ultrasound machine, a new CAT scan, and we need a new CAT scan in Grand Bahama and a new CAT scan in New Providence, renovate accident emergency, do renovations at the RAN or Sandlands Rehabilitation Center, buy a new ambulance at $125,000 each, how far is it going to go? So when you have this reality, your hands are literally tied because you don't have the funding to run your operation, and an incredible demand for services. What it translates into, people say, boy, I come to Princess Margaret Hospital, or I come to the Rand Memorial Hospital, and I had to wait for 8 hours because the CAT scan was broken or the ultrasound machine wasn't working. But there's no connection between I did not pay my $10 or I didn't pay my $20 and the fact that that machine is not working.
Or I run my car into the ambulance on the road, or didn't want to move on the side, or created some other expense that now feeds straight back into
We have
into
12
your budget.
ambulances in New Providence. 5 of them are out of commission right now.
Due to accidents, I'm sure.
For various reasons.
And again, when things like this happen, there's no recourse, eh?
Well, I guess the challenge is...
And here's my thing, sorry. If it is determined that you are abusing the medical system, if you catching a ride in the ambulance on a consistent basis, if you're coming to A&E continuously with these frivolous, and you're identifiable people, you're abandoning your loved ones in the hospital, which I know happens as well, what is the recourse? Who pays at the end of the day? What happens to these people who are abusing the system and costing us
so
money?
you mentioned the borders. So the borders cost the people of Bahamas about $6 million per year.
Because you don't want to take care of your ma.
So oftentimes, right around the start of the Christmas season, we'll get a spike.
So it's a pattern.
There are some identifiable patterns where older people get deposited in the hospital at the start of the Christmas season at times, and then they get picked up after the New Year.
So because you don't want to be bothered with your loved ones for Christmas, you leave them at the hospital.
That is a minority,
But
it happens. But you
Praise
also
it, baby
have
Jesus.
a situation where people say, look, I'm working 2 jobs, I simply can't do it. Now, there may be some guilt or some anguish associated with that decision, but the decision still gets made, so you have between 20 and 30 people that are boarders in the hospital that are there basically to eat, be fed, clothed, and have shelter. So the challenges to our society are felt in Princess Margaret Hospital, and the impact is when people come to the emergency room, there's no room in the inn. You combine that with decisions made in the past where a number of wards were taken out of commission, almost 100 beds taken out of commission, ostensibly to do renovations. But there was no money to complete the renovation, so the contractor left the job.
Wow.
We're completing one of those wards right now, and we have restarted renovations on several of the others. But it will take us a number of months to bring those wards back.
What are some of the temporary relief measures that you are looking, or temporary measures to bring some relief? I know that on a consistent basis, accident and emergency is overrun. There are not beds on the wards for people who have to be admitted, whether through A&E or just walk-ins because they need a procedure. But what are some of the things that are being done that the public can look out for?
So
I would say over the next 6 months.
So the first thing is the urgent care project at Elizabeth Estates and at South Beach to allow people a viable alternative. So you don't have to go to accident emergency, but you can get the same type of care, provided that you don't have one of these life-threatening problems.
Right.
1. 2, we just signed the contract for the architectural design of the expansion of the existing accident emergency. Not only, and we're going to spend almost $5 million on this project to expand, to improve the ambience in accident emergency, to increase the staff complement and equipment. Those 2 projects, the community project and the A&E project, will go a long way, and it'll hold us until we build the brand new accident emergency maternal child health through a public-private partnership.
On the same property?
On the same property. So we made a commitment to phased redevelopment of the Princess Margaret Hospital on the same site. So the new accident emergency and maternal child health, that's maternity and x-ray department, will be in Grosvenor Close. So if you're coming down Shirley Street, the first entrance, which is now Grosvenor closed. There are a number of businesses there. All of those buildings will be demolished, and a new tower will go in that site.
Good stuff. And about the fee structure, how do you think that will impact the rising cost of healthcare and be able to provide you some, I guess, headroom or leeway?
So we need to dramatically increase the amount of funds that we have in order to maintain services. Without that, we have to reduce services so that we can pay for them, because there is no free lunch. So what we have done is we have revised the fee schedule, and we are now doing our due diligence to ensure that it's legal, that it doesn't violate existing policy, it doesn't violate existing union agreements, and so on and so forth. And then we're going to roll it out, and I'm sure there's going to be a public hue and cry. And I suspect that there will be some political mileage taken, as is often the case, that because it's an easy target, you can go and say that, oh, you know, Minister Sands doesn't care about poor people. He just wants to increase fees. It is because we care about poor people, and particularly people who don't have the option to go anywhere else, that we need to make sure that our public health facilities are as good as they can be. And so when I am unable to provide gauze or medication or parts for a drill so that the orthopedic surgeons can fix broken bones, then I have not done my job. If there was an infinite source of funds, I would go ahead and tap that infinite source of funds. But there is no infinite source of funds. We've got to cut waste. We got to make sure that people are getting, that the payment people are getting value for money. But if the law says that you should pay, then you should pay.
Bring your money when you come into the hospital. Stop into the number house on the way there to put in your numbers. Bring your money. We are halfway through our discussion on PHA transforming Bahamian healthcare with Dr. Dwayne Sands, the Minister of Health. We're back right after this. We are in our second season of On the Record, and we thank you, our viewing audience, for allowing us into your homes every Thursday at 8 p.m. We value your opinion, and we want you to be a part of our discussions. So make sure you follow us on Facebook and Instagram and comment on our exciting topics. Remember, it's all on the record.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
Welcome back. Tonight we're talking about PHA, transforming Bahamian healthcare. Dr. Dwayne Sands, the Minister of Health, is my guest. Sir, as of late, the nurses and through their union, they have been really up in arms, even threatening to withdraw services based on a number of outstanding issues. They say outstanding pay, Grand Bahama staff unpaid, some nurses who qualified for increases due to academic degrees say they're not being paid according to their qualifications, and a number of issues that's really played out publicly. I want to speak to the heart of those issues and what has brought the nurses union and government to this point.
So there have been a number of legacy issues stretching back to 2010 or even prior to that, where nurses would have taken courses to advance their skill sets. They would have undertaken use of their automobiles to provide community services, and they were supposed to be paid a mileage allowance, and so on and so forth. So there are a series of documented charges that had not been paid. Some of them go back 3 years, 5 years, 2 years, etc.
Not new issues.
There are several new issues from Hurricane Matthew and Irma, where nurses working overtime had not been paid. But for the most part, most of the new issues have been dealt with. Let me say that nurses are an absolute priority of my administration and me. And we have tried to ensure that there has been an ongoing dialogue with myself, with the permanent secretary, with the managing director, the chairman of the board of PHA, etc., to resolve every single one of these issues. To give you an example, there is an historic challenge with nurses who complete their licensure exams, who find that the process for appointment and payment from their intern salary to their regular salary can take months and months and months. And so you have nurses being graduate nurses, working as full-time nurses, being paid $200, $220 a week, and unable to make ends meet. So the process, let's talk about this current group of registered nurses who would have passed the exams in May. The process then says that they have to be vetted by the Royal Bahamas Police Force, that their degrees have to be vetted by the College of the Bahamas, and so on and so forth, before Health can send a directive to Treasury to put them on a pay sheet, etc. We're now in August, and those nurses have not yet been appointed. The Minister of Health can jump up and down all he wants, because ultimately the Public Service Commission is the final arbiter of appointment. And the ducks have to be lined up in a row. That's an independent body.
How long does it take to verify some information, Minister? I don't understand.
Mr. Sawyer, it takes far too long. And so when you put all of these things together,
these people
now,
have paid for education and sacrifice and are working.
When you put things together, you say that certainly we have to do it better than this. And so we have now created a plan to modify the way these young people are brought on staff so that they don't have to suffer when they're providing service to their country. Because it puts a bitter taste in their mouth.
Rightfully so.
So from my point of view, what we have said is we will resolve every outstanding matter that we can. Some of the charges, suppose you came to me and said that you owe me $500 because of mileage allowance in marijuana. Mm-hmm. We now need to have verification that it wasn't $400 or $600. Because if we pay that and it turns out on audit to have been an incorrect payment, then the officer who signed off on it is personally liable for that payment. Personally liable for that payment. So that process, given the challenge of record keeping and so on and so forth,
and how do you calculate
is tedious and laborious, etc. So it is unfortunate that the situation has gotten to this kind of impasse, particularly since I don't believe, and I'll say this categorically, that there is any minister who has made the commitment to nurses as this one. And so, you know, while it appears that there's a level of acrimony, I don't think that the level of acrimony is consistent with the effort and the good faith that this administration is putting into resolving
So
these
you
issues.
have given your commitment to deal with these issues. Now, one of the issues as well has to do with the implementation of this new shift system that PHA would have announced. I think it's going from going to an 8-hour shift.
So let me try and explain it, because this is somewhat a little bit complicated. So we have 3 shifts. You have days, you have afternoons, you have nights. So the nurses that work days and afternoons work 5 days, they get 2 days off, like most of us. Mm-hmm. So if you work Monday to Friday, you get Saturday and Sunday off. The evening shift, however, what happens is, instead of them working 5 days on and getting 2 days off, they work 4 days on and they get 4 days off. Over the course of a month, the number of nurses required to cover intensive care unit, accident emergency, male surgical one, female medical one, etc., and this is only the night shift now, it takes almost 30 to 40% more nurses to cover all of the wards using the 4 on 4 off than it would if you have a 5 on 2 off. So this has been known for some time, and this has been discussed way back as early as 2013 when the then union leader, Kelfani, nursing union president, and her executive agreed that the 4 on 4 off shift would be eliminated, the 5 on 2 off shift would be implemented at night, but in exchange the nurses would be paid a premium.
It's called a shift premium.
A shift premium. The agreed amount at that time was $1.75 per hour, which basically works out, if you work an 8-hour shift, say $20 per shift. Over the course of a week, if you work in 5, that's $100 per week, that's $5,000 a year. The nurses union that currently exists do not believe that that is an adequate premium.
It's not a lot of money, so when you're working overnights, but
So
to be realistic.
the goal of the Public Hospital Authority is that this is not an area where we need to save money, except as it relates to overtime. What we need to do is to ensure that beds have nurses so that we can open up beds. So in that brand new critical care block, consistently 3 or 4 beds are out of commission, primarily because we do not have nursing coverage. And so when my mother comes in the emergency room with a stroke, or your Grammy comes into the emergency room with a heart attack and needs an intensive care unit bed, and patients go by and families go by and say, but that bed's empty, that bed's empty. No, it's not really empty in the sense that there is no nurse to care for.
There's no one to look after that patient.
And the 4 on 4 off shift system exacerbates that problem. So what we're trying to do is to improve our coverage of patients and also reduce the fatigue on people having to work overtime and so on and so forth.
Let me ask you this. The nurses would have held a meeting with the Prime Minister, I think, on Friday, and he agreed to review their issues, I think, given a 2-week window, promised to get back to them, etc. What is the difference? I'm sure it must make some kind of difference to have now a medical doctor, who was a practicing doctor, sitting as Prime Minister, to be able to now have a view of healthcare, having worked within the system, knowing what the issues are, and more specifically, having to work along, or having had to work alongside nurses who provide very, very critical assistance within the medical field. Has that experience been different? Has it helped? Is it the same?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I think that the spotlight is on the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health to get some things done to solve some of the perennial problems that have existed in health.
You all have come up through the trenches.
Whether it's the challenge with doctors, challenge with nurses, with the delivery of healthcare services across the archipelago. Because of that facility, that working knowledge of what's happening in health. People ask me, why did I get involved in politics? I got involved in politics primarily because of a healthcare agenda. Because having worked in Princess Margaret Hospital and the Rand Memorial Hospital and run the emergency medical services and the national disaster coordination for some time, I recognized that there was only so much you could do at that level, and that unless you were sitting around the table helping to make some of the decisions, that many of these things were not going to get solved. And so the public has given us an opportunity now to put up or shut up. So we've got to solve these problems with the working knowledge that we have. And so I appreciate the opportunity. Sometimes as I go to bed at night, I say, boy, be careful what you ask for. You might get it.
Most definitely. That is when you do get to bed. I know it can be some late nights. Minister, we've got one more segment. I want us to narrow the discussion a bit once we come back, something that we have been trying to discuss on the show for a while. It has to do with HIV/AIDS in the Bahamas. We want to discuss that as well. Stay with us. We are back on the record right after this.
It's a wealth of entertainment with a touch of class and sophistication. A journey of the senses with an unparalleled sense of style. Discover hidden adventures that are cradled in the palms of paradise. Traverse the annals of human history and explore the farthest reaches of exclusivity. It's an excursion that few can afford, but all should experience. And it's only on AWE.
Hi, I'm Davriel, and welcome to Rev Tips, where we answer your most important Rev service questions. Today's question is, how do I set up a Rev My account? It's super easy. To create a Rev My account, simply visit www.cablebahamas.com and click the My Account icon. Next, select the Create Account option. Please have a copy of your latest statement on hand. Enter the information as it appears on the statement to the respective areas on the form. When you have finished, click Create Account to continue with the process. Once you've registered your account, you can use your username and password to check your account balance, view past statements, and pay your bill online. Your My Account credentials also give you access to RevGo Play and all other apps within our suite. And that's your Rev Tip for this week. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us next time.
Welcome back. This is the final segment of this episode. We are discussing PHA transforming Bahamian healthcare with the Minister of Health, Dr. Dwayne Sands. Dr. Sands, back in May, you would have given an interview talking about the state of HIV/AIDS in the Bahamas. You reported in May 1 in 50 people living in the Bahamas with HIV/AIDS. We rank, I think, 17th in the world on the index, highest outside of sub-Saharan Africa and highest in the region. That seems to be an area of healthcare or an area that at one time we gave a lot of attention to, but seems to have fallen off of the public's radar.
I think that's in part because of our successes with HIV/AIDS. And so when you look at the number of persons who have died on an annual basis, it has continued to decrease year over year. Despite that, we have about 8,500 people living with HIV/AIDS in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
It's a lot given our population.
And when we look at the number of new infections, the troubling thing is that it's our young people where we have not made a whole lot of inroads into reducing the transmission of HIV. So a young 16, 17, 18-year-old now, male and female, becoming infected with HIV/AIDS. Dramatic alteration to their life.
When I was a teenager in the 80s, the HIV/AIDS scare, I would call it back then, was just coming onto the scene, and it was all of these, we had all these public education campaigns, and it was almost as if we were frightened into taking protective measures and doing certain things. But as you said, due to the advancements in the level of detection, even in treatment, people don't talk about it as much anymore. The campaigns are gone.
We become very complacent, and so we're ratcheting up that public campaign, and we're trying to be in your face, because the other thing is that the campaign has become somewhat sterile. To the point that, we're not talking in language that many Bahamians understand. We have great difficulty talking about sex. And we certainly pretend as if, men don't have sex with men. We pretend that men only have sex with their wife or their partner, or that women only have sex with one partner, that women only have sex with men, and on and on and on.
You called it a national tendency towards conservatism.
That's euphemistic, but the reality is we don't want to have real talk.
Why not?
Because it is not politically correct, and that's a small p. So the perception is that I am an upstanding family man, and I go home to my wife with whom I have 3 children. And let's not talk about the gal who I go to every night and have unprotected sex with, and the one down on the other corner. Oftentimes, and leave a couple dollars when I go. Okay? We don't talk about the men that have sex on the down low. Or if we talk about the commercial sex workers, who we acknowledge that they exist because depending on where you drive on any given night, you will see them. Now, the definition of commercial sex worker varies from the stereotypical lady on the side of the road to either a man or a woman who accepts money in exchange for sexual favors. We have a whole lot of discussions around the topic, but we do not accept the fact that Bahamians like unprotected sex, that a condom is an inconvenience. Man, I allergic to latex. Oh, you know, it don't feel so good, and so on. But as a consequence, when you look at the adult population, 3 out of every 100 Bahamians are HIV positive. That does include syphilis, gonorrhea, herpes, human papillomavirus, etc. And it is in part because we have loose breeding practices. Okay? We like to have sex. We have a number of unwanted pregnancies. We refuse to acknowledge that abortions take place in the Bahamas on a regular basis, even though they are illegal. So how do you right-size this conversation in order to keep people safe? Because fundamentally, the conversation ought to be about how do I protect myself? How do I protect my family? How do I protect my daughters and my sons? And as long as we have this overly conservative view, we're gonna miss things. So when we look at the reticence of Bahamians to talk about homosexuality, when we look at the reticence of Bahamians to acknowledge that there's a huge LGBTQ community that we have to reach out to, and the Ministry of Health does all the time, as long as those people feel disenfranchised and separated from the mainstream, we are not going to solve this problem. And you know, those who proselytize and speak out about the Sodom and Gomorrah obviously have no real willingness to accept what happens in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas every day and every night.
How do we fix, how do we address, how do we try to continue to keep particularly our young people safe? Because that to me is where the key concern is. I mean, because you're talking about, you know, decades later when the treatments are, you know, as far along as they've ever been. I mean, you could take a treatment now and almost be undetectable.
True.
But all these things are contributing now, but how do you now keep people safe?
You would prefer that our children not be infected.
Yes.
You know, when you start talking about, oh, we have effective triple therapy and we can reduce your viral loads, you missed the boat.
Yeah.
And see, the surrogate, and there is a case for abstinence. Okay, let's start with that. There is a case for, wrap it up, or don't let him touch you. Okay,
and have one partner.
But
that's it.
The truth of the matter is that many of our young people are having sex, and they're having sex at a very young age. We have proof of that because we have girls that are 13, 14, 15 on the maternity ward. Okay? So if our young people are going to have sex, and if the admonition to not have sex isn't effective, then if you are going to have sex, it should be safe sex. Let us have a conversation about wearing a condom all the time, every time. That all of the nonsense about you can look at somebody and tell whether they got that thing is nonsense. Okay, so you know, fathers, mothers, talk to your children, buy them the condoms. Okay, now, you know, when you start having that conversation, no, I ain't going there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Wow.
because what are you trying to get me to force my child to become loose? Well, ask the question, when did you start having sex? And did you use barrier protection all of the time? For those people who are high risk, and you know, this is where it gets really, really complicated, because there are a number of people who don't believe they're high risk. So you can only speak for yourself. You don't know who your partner's doing when they are doing that person or persons. So you may be a wife in what you believe to be a monogamous relationship, but your husband or your partner has 3 other partners. And one of them, it could be a woman, and 2 of them could be men. So every single adult Bahamian should know their status. Every single Bahamian should know their status and the status of the person or people that they're sleeping with.
Sir, we are just about out of time, and I do want to sort of come back to our broader discussion. I want you to give us really some closing remarks on what we can look forward to from our healthcare system. We spent a lot of time talking about what's wrong. We spent some time talking about what it is you and the ministry and PHA and the government is intending to do to try and fix, but really, what can we look forward to as a people over the next year or 2 from you and from our public healthcare system?
We are going to transform healthcare, certainly in the acute care facilities, but we're also going to be focusing on the community clinics throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. What that means is that we're going to be taking the battle out of the hospitals and putting it more into the communities. We're going to be increasing the amount of home care services that we provide. And what we are going to be focusing on are prevention strategies with improved dietary approaches. You've seen that with the breadbasket revision. You're going to see it with new exercise programs from babies all the way up to the octogenarians and nonagenarians. But ultimately, what we would like Bahamians to experience is a personalized healthcare system that manages them as they are, where they are, with the type of services that people can say, you know, this makes some sense, and I feel like I'm a partner in my whole health maintenance program.
So thank you very much for coming by today, spending some time with us and really giving us a snapshot and a real view of what is happening within our healthcare system. I admonish Bahamians to begin to pay for the services that you are receiving. You would have heard the startling numbers of monies that we owe for basic services that certainly the cost is not commensurate with the care that you are receiving and with the services. So please, folks, it's important that we start to pay. We can find money for all other manner of things that we want in our lives. Healthcare is tantamount to our survival. So hope that you have enjoyed tonight's show. Special thanks to my guest tonight, Dr. Dwayne Sands, the Minister of Health. We got to make sure to have you on again sometime, talk about some other things that we didn't get to speak to tonight. My producer, technical staff, and of course you, our audience, for watching. Be sure and join us for more On the Record next week. Once again, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time.